Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Next Page. The Next Page is a program created and sponsored by the Wayne County Literacy Coalition in conjunction this year, sponsored also by Birth to Five. The mission of the coalition and of Birth to Five is to promote literacy in all of its forms throughout Wayne County. We want to welcome you to this show, and we also want to welcome our guest for this segment of The Next Page, Emily Jasenski. And I hope I pronounced that correctly, Emily.
Close enough.
Say it correctly for our viewers.
It's Jasenski.
Jasenski. Now, I want to say that I am excited to have you today for a lot of reasons, but mostly because you are a phenomenal teacher, a practitioner, also owner of a provocative store called Elements Life, and it's really a studio more than a store. And what you're going to talk with us about today, and just your presence here, becomes our next step in the series that we're working with right now on our show, The Literacy of Wellness. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Will you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, Emily, just to introduce yourself to them?
Well, I am a registered yoga teacher, and I own and am also the director of Elements Life Yoga Studio in Greenville, Ohio. And I'm a mother as well and a wife, and I, run yoga teacher training programs, registered yoga teacher training programs, and I teach classes and work privately with people, and that's going to be a lot about the direction that I go with today. Is a lot of my work that I do with my private clients and also just in my public classes as well.
Sounds perfect, because what we've been discussing for the last couple of weeks in discussing the literacy of wellness is a series of maybe techniques, strategies that we can use to become more aware of our own health and wellness issues, and also maybe just to explore what we mean by the literacy of wellness. So we'll put you under the microscope today, or maybe just under the spotlight, and say, Emily, when I use that phrase with you, the literacy of wellness, what does that mean to you in your practice and in the path that you're walking?
The literacy of wellness would mean really about being in connection and being able to read the body and read what it's trying to tell you. And that's where I talk a lot and do a lot of work with self-nurture, and that it's about dropping into the physical body and being able to truly tap into the messages and what it's trying to communicate to you, so that you can really begin to create healthy boundaries for yourself, so that you then learn what best feeds you and what doesn't feed you.
It's hard to take time to listen, isn't it, in this fast-paced world?
Very much.
Do you find that that becomes one of the first challenges in your practice and with your clients, and maybe for our viewers, just taking that first step out of busyness?
Yes, slowing down is just really hard, and that really is the first step in self-nurture, is being able to get into the body. We live in our bodies, but we don't live in our bodies. We live out here and up here, and where we really need to be living is from center. And that really helps us to, again, tap into that. And in order to do that, you really have to slow down. And it's really tricky for people, being able to stop and breathe and just check in.
Because of all the responsibilities, work, the demands, a lot of the multiple roles we have to fulfill. Emily, what have you found to be some good strategies to take step one? Just stop the noise. How could our viewers begin to do that?
I think probably kind of piggybacking on what I just said as far as checking in. And it's just such a simple exercise and tool that anybody can do, and you can do it at any time. That's the beautiful part about it. And that is really just closing your eyes and just feeling the body. You could be feeling in the middle of some joyous event, closing your eyes and feeling that in your body. How does your physical body respond to where you are at that present moment? You always hear about, well, if you're really stressed, close your eyes and breathe deep. And that's great. That's a wonderful tool. And we use that in self-nurture. But it's also about feeling it at all moments so that you can begin to learn how the body responds to what it is you're experiencing. So again, checking in, closing your eyes, breathing deep, and just, what am I feeling right now?
What do I do next? Let's say I've checked in,
Yes.
I've made that connection, then
Yes.
what?
You being with it, sitting with it, staying with it. Wow, this is what joy feels like in my body. This is where I'm feeling anxiety. This is where I'm feeling stress. Wow, I'm really feeling it in my stomach, or I can feel a headache coming on. It's really about being with it. We always feel like we have to dissect everything and we have to have all these 10 steps, where really it's about standing still. It's about being with it.
And holding that.
Yes.
So if I've been able to achieve that and hold that, how would I pack it up and preserve it when I have to re-enter that noisy, busy life of mine?
I think it's something that organically kind of grows, more or less. The more aware you become, the more tapped in you become, and the more you're able to channel that in those really busy moments. If I've done a check-in, let's say earlier in the day in a really stressful situation, I'm feeling really good, I've really embodied that and tapped into that, and then I'm pretty relaxed and kind of going throughout my day, and then I get home and my kids are crazy and life is crazy, and I immediately begin to feel my body respond to my environment. Then because I have that already existing awareness, then I can be like, okay, I'm feeling this again in my stomach, or I'm feeling it in my chest. Now it's time for me to breathe and come back to that state of groundedness that I felt right before I entered.
I love that. Immediately we can know, and the viewers know, what great benefits this would be for our mental health and maybe spiritual health. But explore with us a bit how this connects into our physical health.
And that is such an important piece, because self-nurture is really about using the body as a roadmap to figuring out what it is that our spirit needs and what boundaries we need to create for ourselves. And the physical aspect is just so important, and really being able to feel it and use it as an outlet, use it as a sense of, okay, this is how my body is responding. We don't really, we might notice that in stressful situations that we become cloudy in the head, or obviously we have our responses verbally sometimes to those stressful situations. But to feel it in the body, I feel like, is to truly process it.
Yes.
This is how that we have this incredible vessel that lets us process this really grainy, sometimes complicated and energy. And we can do that, I feel like, through just breathing it and just really feeling it and then releasing it.
Are there negative effects if we don't get in touch with our body? What are we
yeah.
What are we risking if we don't take those moments?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, just your overall health is such an important piece to that. I'm not going to directly say what type of health issues you could have. I'm not a physician, but we know this mind-body-spirit connection is so powerful, and that our health directly connects to that. So, it really... definitely health, and that is health across the board. Yes, physical health, mental health, and our ability to be fully and completely aware and vital in life. That is the key, I feel like. We can be healthy and work out and eat well, and, we can practice meditation and do those types of things to help us, get more grounded and settled up here. But really, we really need to nurture spirit as well. And I really feel like that to nurture spirit, it's about feeding it in all the right ways.
Can anyone do this, Emily? And is this accessible to all ages, body types? Maybe some of our viewers are sitting at home thinking, I'm a couch potato. How do I even enter a world where my mind and body are really talking to each other? Or maybe in the reverse, my mind goes a million miles an hour. I'll never be able to do that.
Yeah. You know what? Everybody, if you're awake, you're aware. And I honestly believe that even spirit is aware when we're sleeping. So absolutely, and anybody can. This is what an incredible tool to teach children. I mean, what an incredible tool to teach young adults or, teenagers. Absolutely. Anybody can do this. If you are aware and awake and you're breathing and you're alive, then you can absolutely do this.
This is encouraging for our viewers, I know, because stress is caused by it's one of those risk factors of not grabbing those moments in breathing. And we know how stress is connected to so many problems in our body. So if we want to take the next step then to really kickstart this, we remembered at the beginning of the hour, you talked about you do private consultations. How does that go? Describe that a moment. How would that work?
A private session is where obviously I work one-on-one with people, and we can really focus and tailor the session to meet whatever their individual needs are. So that's number one, and that's great. And obviously, we might do some yoga, some physical movement, some breathing. But really, when we're talking in terms of self-nurture, it's about tapping in to the body. And so many people, in our world, because it is so fast-paced, run so quickly, that just getting them in a state of relaxation enough to become aware of the body. There's a process with this. It's not like you necessarily just sit down and become aware, which you can. I mean, that's kind of, step one, okay. But it's also about being able to relax, and I like to call drop into the body.
Yes.
Where you drop in and you take a moment to just be. So we might spend, out of a whole hour private session, we might spend 20 minutes just trying to drop in to the body and really get in there so that we can then begin the process of dissecting how we feel and tapping into maybe some feelings or sensations that come up for us. So, I would say that that's a good part. We also might do some guided meditation or imagery in that as well.
Oh, this sounds wonderful. You've helped us understand so much about literacy of wellness today. Emily, thank you for joining us on the next page.
Thank you for having me.
Hello, and welcome back to this segment of The Next Page. In this segment, we have a special interview that we've taped for you. I hope you'll enjoy this. Joining me in this special segment is Dr. Bill Blackerby. Bill is a neuropsychologist currently practicing in Knoxville, Tennessee. Bill, thank you so much for joining us on this segment of The Next Page. For all of our viewers, we want to extend a great appreciation for your traveling so far today to join us on the program, and special appreciation for you sharing your expertise with us today as we continue discussing the literacy of wellness. Now, as a neuropsychologist, we're going to put you on the hot seat with regard to our mental health. We've been talking about physical health and spiritual health and overall body health. But Bill, when we say mental wellness or mental health, what do we mean by that exactly?
Well, that's a tough question. For me, from my perspective, what it means is having the ability to cope with the stresses and pressures of our ordinary lives without having to resort to extreme measures in order to get by.
Right, and so daily stressors can be anything from occurrences at our job to bills we might get in the mail to maybe those kids or grandkids. And so coping mechanisms, talk a little bit about that. What do we mean by skills we can develop to help us meet head on those challenges of daily life?
Well, from my standpoint, stress is one of the largest determinants of mental health in our society. We seem to be becoming increasingly stressed and having to cope with increasing amounts and sources of stress, and it takes a huge toll on us physically and emotionally.
What kinds of physical problems can we develop if we slip into stress and we lose hold of that good mental health we're trying to maintain?
Well, we are learning a tremendous amount these days about the interaction between our physiology and how we think about our lives, and our environment. Those three things interact tremendously, much more so than we had ever thought before. So things that happen to us in our lives get categorized in a certain framework in our minds. And those two things, independently and together, affect our hormones, our neurotransmitters, and our physiologic responses. For example, we have a hormone called cortisol, which is the primary stress-related hormone. And cortisol affects nearly 300 separate functions in our body in response and how our bodies respond to stress. So excessive stress, either originating in our minds or originating in our environment, changes our cortisol levels, which changes these 300 physiologic reactions, and over time can result in tremendous disease and even mortality.
Wow, that's just amazing. 300 different functions,
Right.
and one hormone. How powerful. So what can we do, for example, on a typical day that we know is going to present us with stress and challenges? How might we approach that in a better way to maximize our chance of successfully coping and minimize our chance of being washed over by the stress of the day?
The first and most important thing is to breathe. As we get stressed, our breathing becomes shallower and more rapid. And if we take the time to breathe deeply, slowly, that does wonders for changing our internal physiology in response to stress. Another thing is that we've got to learn to take breaks. Americans work 40, 60, 80 hours a week. Breaks cost money, and the problem is the long-term effects of not taking breaks are deleterious to our health. Sleep. Americans sleep. There's plenty of research that shows that over the past 30 years we get less and less sleep as we get more and more stressed. And we are learning these days that sleep plays an enormous restorative role in maintaining our health. Finding time to sit and rest and maybe do nothing is a tremendous benefit to reducing stress, to improving what's called our homeostasis, which is the tendency of our bodies to seek a normal, natural, healthy point of existence. But how many of us sit and do nothing? And it's interesting, this has all been recognized for a long, long time. For example, Freud, a long time ago, said that the most important things in life are to work and to play, and later he amended that and included to rest. But yet, what do we do about it despite what we know about it? And there are lots of other things that are really powerfully effective in helping us deal with the physiologic problems related to stress and unhappiness, such as meditation and yoga and exercise. Those sorts of things it turns out, we're recognizing that the role they play in keeping us healthy is more powerful than we ever knew.
How about food? I mean, we
yes.
usually think about
good
food as
example.
body, but what about food in our
Good
mental
example.
health?
Yeah, look at the growth of fast food and the decline in our health. And we see that also powerfully in the Japanese. As their culture becomes more westernized, they begin to develop some of the same trends in health problems that we have here in America. And there are other international examples of this as well. But yeah, nutrition is enormously important. Let's take one simple little chemical that nobody ever thinks about, magnesium. Magnesium, which there's a little bit usually in most multivitamins, but how many people take multivitamins every day? However, what's important is that magnesium does more than 200 things in our bodies to maintain proper chemical balance. There's a supplement that used to be quite common. It was kind of a fad for a while, called SAM-E, which is a plant-derived nutritional supplement. It turns out that SAM-E also does more than 200 things in our bodies to help regulate and maintain our health. So nutrition is enormously important, but virtually ignored in our society these days.
Just amazing. So often we perceive of mind and body as two separate entities, but if I'm hearing you correctly, they really are so interwoven that to maintain one maintains the other, but to create a problem for one creates a problem for the other.
Right, in both directions. Our internal physiology can affect our depression and vice versa. Environmental stressors, depending on how we categorize it in our minds. Is this a terrible tragedy, or is this something that may be a bad thing, but I can deal with it and go forward? Will determine how our bodies respond to it, and that in turn affects our overall health and our disease and our mortality and morbidity. And those connections are very clear.
If we think about listening to ourselves with regard to wellness, we think about the literacy of wellness. We've talked a lot to our viewers about being introspective and listening to ourselves. What are some of the warning signs that we might hear from ourselves, within ourselves, that we're not handling stressors as well as we could? What will be some of the preliminary warnings that maybe we need more rest, we need more play, we need to cut back?
Irritability, sadness, recognizing one's own emotions and changes will provide a lot of the signposts that are needed to say, hey, something's not right here. How much you sleep is affected by your stress level, by what you're worried about, etc., by the terrible things that may be happening outside in your environment, and that's a signpost. If you're unable to sleep as much as you have in the past, that should say something to you. And digestion is another good example. You would be, I don't remember the numbers, but you would be amazed to find out how many people are taking antacids every day these days. And why is that? Mostly it's because of stress.
And when we say irritability or sadness become signs, what you mean is like a prolonged irritability, a prolonged, one that doesn't
uncharacteristic,
go away.
Extended irritability or sadness.
So what do we do if we've listened to our body and we're involved in the literacy of wellness, and our literacy of wellness is saying something isn't right here? What would you recommend as our frontline response, and maybe what should we do if our frontline response doesn't work?
Yeah, well, you first have to do the basics, what we've already talked about. Nutrition, sleep, exercise, breathing, getting some quiet time. And of course, what people say is, I don't have time for all that. Well, you're making a choice. Choices have consequences. Some consequences are near term, some are long term, and consequences have different probabilities. So if smoking helps you de-stress, that's a short-term positive consequence of smoking, but what are you doing in the long term? If working your tail off to make enough money to pay your bills in a short term may be a good thing, in the long term it's killing you. You have to consider the consequences of your actions, both in the short term and in the longer term.
So we're going to do this reflection in calculus, and let's say we need to make some adjustments. It sounds like we can preliminary do some self-care here.
Oh, absolutely. And it would reduce the load on the healthcare system tremendously if it were widespread.
Even self-care in the form of maybe joining a yoga class or
Right.
going, and these days you can go online or have someone direct you
Sure.
online to learn a little bit about meditation, about
Right.
taking a break and stepping out of this really high-paced world we
Right.
live in.
You don't even have to leave home.
Oh, really beautiful. And so someone who is listening to his or her mind and is detecting there's a problem, would try some of these frontline remedies. Bill, when do we know that we may need some professional care? Is that line hard to determine, or is it pretty easily detected when we need to really move beyond ourselves and ask our physician or another healthcare professional for some help?
When one is thinking about themselves, and if they have tried one or more of the things we've been talking about to no avail over some period of weeks, and things feel like they're getting worse, either feel physically like they're getting worse or feel mentally like they're getting worse, then it's time to see somebody. And the line for me may be different than the line for you or for anyone else, but if we're sensitive to that, and we stop, and you have to take the time to introspect enough to say, wait, this isn't working. But a lot of people don't even take the time to say that. They just feel miserable until they become basket cases.
So it's really taking that time to listen to
To
the
think
inner voice.
about, okay, how am I doing? Right. And is this the time where I need some help in coping with things, or can I manage this?
The literacy of mental health is just as important as the literacy of physical health, and really they're one and the same thing.
They're one and the same thing, absolutely.
Bill, thank you so much for joining us today on the
You're
next
welcome.
page.
This is fun. Thank
Thank
you.
you.